All right, my friends, welcome to another Middot for Modern Life class. We are calling this class Spiritual Middot 2. Okay. If you remember from last class, we actually talked about 4 different Middot. We spoke about joy, awe, loving kindness, and compassion. And we talked about the interconnectivity between them, but I will also categorize these 4 as what I would say are external or midot in which we expand ourselves, right? We expand ourselves. When we have awe, we see the world much bigger than it is. When we have compassion, loving kindness, when we are feeling joy, we are expanding ourselves. Today, we're going to talk about midot in which we're going to withdraw ourselves a little bit. Okay? What do I mean by that specifically? We're going to talk about humility, gratitude, and patience. Right? Humility, gratitude, and patience. And I see these as that bringing ourselves in, taking up less space than the other ones, which we take up lots of space. We're overflowing with joy, okay? We're overflowing with loving kindness. Okay. We're going to speak first about humility or anava. And the best place to start is with Moshe Rabbeinu, right? With Moses. In Bamidbar, in Numbers, it says, V'ha'ish Moshe anav me'od. Moses himself was very humble, not just humble, anav me'od, right? Very humble, more so than any other human being on earth. And so there's a lot of time that is taken within our tradition of looking at humility, at anava, through Moshe. How did Moses behave? How did Moses respond in certain situations? Because he is that paradigm for humility. Can anybody think of a moment, a biblical moment where Moses, you feel that Moses reflected that anava, that humility? Nan?
Actually, it's me. I'm here with
David,
Nan.
go ahead.
David.
Sorry, all I see is Nan.
I don't know if it's true, but I heard an old story that Moses was very ugly and he looked like a criminal or like somebody who was an evil person. And when somebody kind of like challenged him on that and like asked him about, he's such a enlightened person. How come he had the look of someone who was like a criminal or a bad person? His response was that his response kind of showed his humility. It was like
Yeah, you're actually recalling a very famous rabbinic story in the Talmud, but it wasn't about Moses. It was actually about one of the rabbis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
But your story was very correct, and actually the rabbi's response is, if you don't like the way I look, go talk to the creator. Right? If you don't like the way the pot looks, go talk to the potter.
Okay, so that one wasn't Moses. That was somebody else.
But it wasn't Moses. Yeah, it wasn't Moses. But it's actually a good example of anava, of humility. Diana.
I think, can you hear me okay? I'm in the car.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I think like when he's called to be the leader and he's like, well, why me? Like, I don't even speak well. Like, why? And it could have been a little bit of like cat and mouse, but there also could have been like, hey, I'm just taking a walk and like, what did I do to deserve this?
Yeah,
position?
I think so. I think that is sort of the start of all of that, of that humility of saying, why me? There are a lot of better people. Why me? And for me, Moshe, one of the ways that we saw Moshe as being humble is, for the most part, not every moment, because he gets called on it sometimes, but for the most part, the way in which he disagrees with God, the way in which he kind of pushes back, is very respectful and humble. It's not, how could you possibly think that? But it's humble, it's respectful, and it creates that sort of model of how it is that we should behave.
What I wanted to say was, it's kind of like he's saying, really, are you sure you want me? Like, kind of thing.
Right.
So
Okay, let's continue. And we're going to look at a section from Talmud, Masechet Ta'anit. And Rabbi Chana Bar Idi said, why are matters of Torah likened to water? As it's written in Isaiah, everyone who thirsts come for water. This verse comes to tell you, just as water should be, as water leaves a high place and flows to a low place, so too Torah matters are retained only by those whose spirit is lowly, that is, a humble person. Right? That the water flows downstream and it's more lush and more verdant downstream than upstream, so too is Torah, right? The true lush and most profound Torah is learned by those people who are humble. We also have another Talmudic statement in Avodah Zarah that says humility is greater than all of the different attributes. As it's stated, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good tidings to the humble. This is also in Isaiah. Since the pious is not stated, but rather the humble, you learn that humility is greater than all of them. So the rabbis are setting up humility as a big deal, And Musar, right? The Musar masters pick up on this. Rabbi Menachem Mendel, who was the author of something called Cheshbon Nefesh. It's also sort of a way of thought, Cheshbon Nefesh, but it's a work that he wrote as well. He writes as follows: always seek to learn wisdom from everyone, to recognize your failings and correct them. In doing so, you will learn to stop thinking about your virtues, and you will take your mind off your friends' faults. So what's interesting here is the Musar practitioners start to see humility not just as a good thing, but as something which is a catalyst to help us live life in a better way. So if we seek to learn from everyone, which, by the way, is a rabbinic dictum, right, from the Talmud, and actually from earlier, from the Mishnah, learn from everyone. If we do that, that imposes on us some humility, because we're saying I can always learn from everybody. I can learn from even people I wouldn't have thought, to pay attention to. Well, I might be able to learn something from them. And it creates that sense of humility. And then he takes it a step further, which I found really fascinating, right? In doing so, we stop thinking about our virtues and stop thinking about our friends' faults. And it opens us up to growth. And for me, I think humility, and I would argue all of the things we're going to talk about today, are all about growth. It's hard to really talk about growth when you're talking about joy. Maybe, right? Maybe there could be some growth there. But growth happens when we remove ourselves from a place and allow something else to be there so we can learn. We can then move into a different direction. That's where growth happens. And so humility and the other attributes that we're going to learn are all about growth. Any comments so far on humility? We still have more sources, but Michael.
Kind of strikes me that awe and humility are closely related when we're speaking about the relationship with God, especially.
Yes. Yes. There are a lot of connectedness in all of this, right? We can draw lines from last week to this week as well. I separated them because of the paradigm that I'm sort of talking about expansion and contraction, but there's a lot, all of these are interconnected,
Okay.
right?
To be
To show gmilut chasadim, right? To show loving kindness necessitates humility.
correct.
It necessitates patience, right? So some of these things are all interconnected. I agree with you, Michael. All right. So Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Cook wrote, genuine humility and lowliness. It's actually a word we haven't sort of heard in English used in this way. Lowliness. It's the opposite of haughtiness, right? Haughtiness is holding yourself up high. Here, he's saying lowliness. Increase health and vitality. Whereas imaginary humility causes illness and melancholy. So he is actually recognizing the fact that humility is something that can be faked to some degree, right? We know people who have this persona and they sort of emanate this humility, but we know deep down inside it's actually an act. And genuine humility creates that health and vigor and vitality. And this imaginary humility actually creates melancholy, ultimately, he argues. Therefore, one should choose humility and lowliness in their clear form and avoid this fake humility. Okay, by the way, there's so much good stuff here that, it was really difficult for me to try and cull out the stuff that I didn't want to talk about. So there's a lot, and I'm going through a lot. But please jump in if something moves you, if something, if you have a comment on it, or like Layla said, this is beautiful. Just whatever reactions you've got, it's great. Let's let everybody hear. In Chavot HaLevavot, a classic Musar text, I'm not going to go through all of this. He argues that pride, right? So the opposite of humility. Pride, there are two types, one disgraceful and one praiseworthy. It's disgraceful if a person is proud of his wisdom or the righteous man of his deeds, if this makes whatever he already had of them to be so much in his eyes and makes him think that the good name and high opinion is enough for him, and then makes him belittle and despise others. But the praiseworthy type of pride is when a person is proud of his wisdom or the righteous man of his deeds and considers them a great favor of the Creator, for which to be thankful and joyous. This causes him to try to add on to them, to be humble with his near ones and enjoy his friends. So what's interesting is Rabbeinu Bachya is recognizing the fact that pride is part of who we are as human beings. And it's not always a bad thing, right? We teach our kids to be proud of their accomplishments. We want them to be proud. But there's a healthy pride that incorporates humility, and there's an unhealthy pride that negates humility. And that's what I wanted to get at. Diana?
Sorry about that. I was going to say, I love the efficiency of the Yiddish words for that, because I was thinking in Yiddish, there's gaiva, which is pride, but it's like arrogant or like obnoxious almost. And then if you're like proud of someone, you can be proud of someone, it's like not. And they're like, it really to me illustrates that whole spectrum
I agree. Well,
of that type of pride.
I couldn't have paid you better.
And
Thank you,
Oh.
because now we're going to talk about the spectrum of humility.
oh,
Okay.
that was awesome.
So I'm gonna mute you just because I'm hearing something from in the background with you, Diana. So the spectrum of humility, right? There's this middle ground that we're looking for, because too little humility creates arrogance. Too much humility creates self-effacement, or as the American Musar website wrote, doormat-like behavior, right? And so we're looking for somewhere between arrogance and self-debasement to find that humility. It's not, oh, we should be so humble and nobody should know we're there. That's not who we are as Jews. It's knowing your appropriate space and allowing for learning and growth from other people. And the best story that talks about this balance, right? This balance between arrogance and self-debasing is a great story that is brought by Martin Buber in his Tales of the Hasidim, and a lot of people know it, about Rabbi Bunim. Rabbi Bunim taught every person should have two pockets. In one pocket should be a piece of paper saying, I am but dust and ashes. When one is feeling too proud, reach into this pocket, take it out, and read it. In the other pocket should be a piece of paper saying, for my sake, the world was created. And when one is feeling disheartened and lowly, reach into this pocket, take out this paper, and read it. We are each the joining of two worlds. We are fashioned from clay, but our spirit is the breath of Adonai. This idea of finding our balance in the world is so much a part of who we are and what humility means in the Musar world, right? And it's important that we understand the distinction between this and some of the other religious traditions that talk about humility really as this self-effacing attitude. You see that among monks in Christianity, where humility really is about, you shouldn't own anything, you shouldn't, right? It's all about getting rid of that self, anything that could prop up the self. To some degree, you see that in Buddhism as well for different reasons. That's just because attachment to this world is not what they're looking for. But in Judaism, that's not who we are, right? We're allowed to be proud of our accomplishments. We're allowed to say, hey, I did something and I'm proud of that. Come join me because this is cool. Like that's all okay. But when it starts to attack other people, when it starts to use that to push other people down to make us feel better, that's when our tradition starts to say, hey, it's time to take out that paper. I am but dust and ashes.
Why does it feel like not everybody remembers this on a daily basis? Because this could make such a beautiful world if, within our community of Jewish people, like treat one another with this, balance of humility and pride.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. And then you sit there and your message is like, this class is amazing for me this week. It's like one of the things I needed to hear because somebody put me down. And I sit there and I'm like really sad, like hurt about it. and they're Jewish, but
Mhm.
each their own and each practices their own. But why can't we all come together and create this beautiful world this way?
Yeah.
It seems
Look,
like
I
we just
mean,
simply don't
on
understand.
the one hand, you could argue that the reason these are practices is because they don't come easily to us, right? Ultimately, we have two sides, and that's kind of what he's saying at the end of all of this, right? We're of this physical world, meaning we've got that animal side to us that's all about, filling our own desires and our own lusts, and that being satisfied, in all of our needs and desires. And then there's the spiritual side, which is what teaches us these other things. And sometimes one side is more important, takes more prevalence in our lives than the other, and we forget.
But then are these people phonies if they're too prideful? In the age of, sorry, I'm going to be super modern, like Kim Kardashian and Instagram
Yeah,
and
this
and
is
and and, and all the modifications to the body, this like vanity. Like
yeah,
how do you live in a world like this and be
this is
able
the
to
age of the selfie, right? It used to be that we went through life taking pictures of the world around us. Now we take pictures of
Mhm.
ourselves, right? As if the world wants to know, right? Talk about a need for humility. I agree with you. This is one of the biggest challenges, I think, in the modern world that we have, is finding that sense of where we belong, what's our space, and not being shy to say, hey, this is who I am and I'm good at this, right? I have no problem saying I'm good at Talmud. I'm not good at basketball, right? I may be 6'2". Don't let that fool you. So everyone's got to find, and that's okay. But you have to find that balance and that humility. I agree with you, Layla. Marge, did you want to make a comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, I've made this comment before. It's like these concepts are so moving and important, but how do we teach them? I mean, we're doing this as adults in a class because we choose to learn them, but you know, wouldn't it be a fun exercise to give kids to have the kids put of these things in each of their pocket, and then for the next day or next period in class have to give it to each other, say, oh, pull that out of your pocket, or
So
you know
we
what I
do. We do teach it to the kids, but I will say to you,
mean?
Marge, I find children are more naturally drawn to these things if we allow them to be than adults are. I think adults need this more than the kids do.
Yeah, but I think because what happens is you may have some of these things as a child, but then you lose them as you move into a different kind of world,
Yeah.
right? So, but if it's brought to your attention as a child that this is valuable, you might hold on to it longer. And and we might be doing this in our Hebrew school, but where is it in the rest of the world?
Well, yeah. I mean, I,
So,
I, in my humility, I will say I only have impact over a very small segment of the population. So,
yes.
okay, let's leave humility and move on to gratitude. Now, what's interesting is that the Hebrew midah of gratitude is actually called hakarat hatov. Marge, did you have another question or no?
No, I was just going to try to lower my hand. That's all.
Okay, I got you.
But I did it twice. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Hakarat hatov, which means acknowledgement of the good, recognizing the good. And it's a very interesting take on the concept of gratitude, because you have to recognize the good things in your life before you can show gratitude for them. You can't expect somebody to show gratitude if they look around and they say, nothing's good. What am I to be grateful for? And so the Musar practice isn't so much, I'm kind of cutting to the chase here at the beginning. The Musar practice isn't so much about saying thank you as it is about recognizing the good moments in our life. Because if you do that, you're naturally going to say thank you. right? So that's where the work is for the Musar practitioner. Okay. So we're going to start with the Mishnah Torah, which is a collection of laws by Maimonides, by Rambam. And he actually puts this in a law code, right? 4 individuals are required to render thanks. A person who's been sick and recuperated, a person who has been imprisoned and was released, people who arrive at their destination after a journey at sea, which was extraordinarily dangerous at the time, and travelers who reach a settlement. So you're going a far distance and you finally make it to where you're going, right? These thanks must be rendered in the presence of 10 people, of whom 2 are sages, right? So not only are these people supposed to say thank you, but they're supposed to say it publicly. That's where I want to start, right? An acknowledgement of gratitude is to some degree an emotional state, but in Jewish practice, it's actually something that we do, not something that we feel. It's not enough to feel grateful. We need to do something about that. And how does he give thanks, and what blessing should he recite? Right? He should stand in the midst of the above-mentioned company and say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who bestows benefits upon the culpable and who has bestowed goodness upon me." Right? Thank you, God. And this blessing has changed, by the way. When you hear something good or something good has happened in your life, the blessing that we now say is Hatov v'hametiv. We bless you, God, who is good and who causes good in the world. Right? That's our gratitude blessing. Things are good. That's all it takes. Just a moment. Just a moment. Things are good. So he actually argues that these 4 people have to show gratitude, and he puts that in the law. But it's a lot more than that, a lot more cases than that. And so we're going to look back at Mishnah Brachot, which is from a significant time earlier, right? This was finished around the year 200. And it takes it in a very interesting direction. It's one of the most complicated Mishnayot to really understand. It reads as follows: one is obligated to recite a blessing for the bad that befalls him, just as he recites a blessing for the good that befalls him. Right? We have to recognize these moments in our life. And this process of recognizing the bad helps us sometimes find the good, right? A lot of times, and I'm sure Marge does this in her practice as well, a lot of times I'll be talking to somebody who's really, really worried about something, and I'll ask, so what's the worst that could happen? They're really nervous about something. What's the worst that could happen? And we go there, we say, okay, this is the worst that could happen. And yeah, it may suck. It may not be great. But by doing that, it allows them to sort of compartmentalize that and then also realize, well, that what are other things that could happen? As opposed to nothing could possibly happen because, of course, this is the only thing that could possibly happen and it's horrible, awful. That's where people tend to be. But when we recognize the bad for what it is, right? Okay, we recognize that. We've had a loss. We've had a downturn. We've had somebody treat us not well. Okay. We say a blessing for that. We capture that moment in the same way that we capture the good moments. And then it goes on to say, the Mishnah explains this verse as follows: with all your heart means with two inclinations, right? With your good inclination and your evil inclination. With all your soul means even if God takes your soul. With all your might means your money. But it's this first part of it, the 2 inclinations, that that really are what we're talking about. Brooks, hi.
Hi. Is it possible to be express gratitude without humility? I think they're linked. Yeah.
Is it possible to express gratitude without humility? Probably not, but it's a good question. I haven't thought of that directly. I don't know. Marge, what do you think? Is it possible to to have gratitude without humility? You have to unmute yourself though, Marge.
I did the last time.
I know.
I think you probably could have gratitude without humility, but everything goes on a spectrum pretty much.
Yeah.
So it would be on the very low end of the spectrum.
I think I would argue, Brooks, that true gratitude requires a certain level of humility.
I would think so too.
Because it requires us to acknowledge somebody else or something else other than ourselves, and those people who don't have humility have a hard time doing that.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I can't talk about gratitude on the first day of Tishrei, although first day of Nisan, although now we're on the second day of Nisan, without highlighting what we're all going to be singing very, very shortly. Dayenu, right? Dayenu is an expression of gratitude, but it's an interesting way that we as Jews express gratitude. It starts by saying there are so many great things that we must thank God for. And then here comes the humility, Brooks, right? Well, if God had just split the sea for us and not taken us through on dry land, Dayenu, that by itself is enough to show gratitude. And we go through this whole process and we sing Dayenu, and some people hit each other with green onions. That's depending on your tradition and Passover. Yes, it's a Sephardic tradition that during Dayenu, you hit each other with green onions as a remembrance of the taskmasters, and it's also a way to keep the kids engaged and awake. So Dayenu is an expression of gratitude. So in 2 weeks, when we're singing at our Passover Seders and we're singing Dayenu, take a moment and understand this as a moment to express gratitude. Alan Marinis writes as follows. The Hebrew term for gratitude is hakarat hatov, which means literally recognizing the good. It reminds us the good is already there. Practicing gratitude means being aware of the good that is already yours. And that's the difference, right? Gratitude is not about the good that I want. It's about the good that I have. And that, to me, right, is what Shabbat is all about. We spend 6 days talking about the good that and working for the good that we want. We want a nice house. We want a nice car. We want to feed our children. We want all of these things in our life. We want to make a difference in the world around us, make an impact. All of those are good things. But it's all about the things that we want. Shabbat says, take 25 hours each week and show gratitude for the things that you have. He also writes, when you open yourself to experience the trait of gratitude, you discover with clarity and accuracy how much good there is in your life. Whatever you are lacking will still be missing, of course. And in reaching for gratitude, no one is saying you ought to put on rose-colored glasses to obscure those shortcomings. The obstacles to appreciating the good can also be very real, especially when life is riven by suffering. But it's worth the effort to practice gratitude, especially since the one who benefits most is the one who's suffering. Recognizing the good affirms life, and more, because you see the good in the world, it sets your heart free to soar, to shout, and to sign, should be to sing a song of life, I think, not to sign a song of life. This connects us back to joy from yesterday. When you have gratitude, it leads into joy, which then leads into all of those expanding things. And what we see is that living life is about the expansion and contraction. We need to contract first with gratitude before we can expand with joy.
And it's twofold, right? If you express gratitude, that is joyful in and of itself.
It is. It is. Not always, Layla, but I would say more often than not, expressing gratitude is joyful. Diana and then Peter.
Okay. Sorry, I just got home from a little road trip, so I was
Okay.
on mute. I actually think of everything that we're doing, the first part about gratitude, Hakara Hatov, is actually the easiest one there is. All you have to do is wake up in the morning. And the first thing you say is Modeh Ani,
Right.
which is thank you. Hey, I'm here. It's like 12
But Diana,
words.
that's you, right? And I
That's true.
agree. Right, that's you. There are a lot of people that wake up in the morning and the first thing they say is, I need coffee.
Oh, well, I say that too after those
No,
12 words.
but it's a different
And-
mindset, right? Think
Oh.
about it for a second, right? Waking up
Yeah.
in the morning saying, thank you, God, for letting me wake up, or waking up in the morning and saying, I need coffee. One is about gratitude, one is about fulfilling my needs.
That's fair, but you can also say a shahakol over your coffee.
If you do. And I guess I think that's what
attaching
this that's what this is trying to teach us, is
Mhm.
to take these moments that are necessary in life
Mhm.
and find a little gratitude to add into them.
Or if you say I have to use the bathroom when you wake up, hey, there's a blessing for that too.
It's true.
So I think that's part of like the practice of this. And then eventually it really does become muscle memory. Like, I don't know, maybe after 56 years of doing this, like you just wake up but I think it's like that. I saw a beautiful new moon today. I don't know if any of you saw the new moon for Nissan. It's like exquisite. And it's like,
Yes. However, I agree with everything you've said. Now I'm going to take it a step further. And when it becomes muscle memory too much, you also are at risk of going the other way
that's
and just checking the boxes. So you
That's
have to
true.
find that middle ground again to
Yeah.
make sure that you're
Yeah.
not just davening because you have to,
Yeah.
right? But you're actually really thinking about it. Peter.
I love that way of looking at it. Thank you.
Where does that first spark really come from to get you in that mood? Okay. It's something that you question always. Where's it come from? What
You have to practice seeing it, right? The spark, what Hakarat HaTov is teaching us is the spark is there. The question is, are you going to see it? That's why it's recognizing the good. It's back to Morenis's first point, right? It's there. You woke up this morning, and that's a blessing. There are some people who didn't, right? And so the question is, are you going to make room in your life to see that, to get to notice it? And it takes practice. It takes practice in order to do that. Carolyn, how are we doing on time? We're good.
I think it's really important to be cognizant of all the people who suffer from pathological issues, mental health issues, and for whom this kind of thing is really not easy.
100%. 100%. And it's one of the reasons why we need to actually help those people who are willing to be helped with treatment and with those sorts of things, and acknowledge that, so that they can, because without that, it's so hard to achieve any of these midot. Joy and gratitude are really hard for somebody who's clinically depressed. So I agree with that 100%, Carolyn. Thank you for bringing that out. Layla.
I wanted to also bring like a practical practice, right? So for those who don't have the feelings and the, that thing that sparks them inside just yet. I read Atomic Habits. I forget the author, but the Atomic Habits is a fantastic book with so many practical and spiritual applications. And all you have to do is, I mean, read the book. It's fantastic, but
I
just a
highly
little step.
recommend it.
Yeah, it's just little steps, and then you can habit stack. And so when you do this, then you're triggered to do this. And it takes 28 days to develop a habit. And so anybody who's having a hard time with developing the gratitude and the humility and, and thus the joy, it is very helpful from a very practical, pragmatic standpoint if they're struggling with the spiritual aspect of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm blanking on his name at the moment also, but I highly recommend Atomic Habits. I've actually read the book. For those who have Masterclass, which is a
The author is James Clear.
thank you. He's also on Masterclass. If you're a subscriber of Masterclass, you can take a wonderful class with him as well for that. All right, I think this is the last one for, no, two more for gratitude, then we'll move on to patience. Have patience and we'll get to patience. It is taught in a Braita. Rabbi Meir would say a person is obligated to recite 100 blessings every day. For those who know me and who've been around a long time, this is one of my favorite sections of Gemara to teach. The fact that I have to look for things to be grateful for. It's not just, oh, I'm going to be grateful and when it happens, right? But if I have to say 100 blessings a day, even if I pray 3 times a day and whatever, that's still going to leave me 30, 20 blessings that I still have to go out and search for, right? And it forces us to turn gratitude into something that is an active pursuit, as opposed to something that we just try to recognize when it happens. Okay. Finally, in Duties of the Heart by Ibn Pakuda, there are 3 things that keep us from being grateful, according to him. 1, we become too occupied with material things. For example, we want the very latest iPhone. I don't think Ibn Pakuda talked about the iPhone. This is from Greg Marcus in the way that he's doing it, but we become too occupied with material things is from Ibn Pakuda. And we forget how useful the version we already have is, right? This desire for more sometimes precludes us from recognizing the gifts that we have right now. I see this a lot unfortunately, I see this a lot in marriages, because we live in a society where we're looking at these quote unquote ideal marriages of what a marriage should be. And it forces us to say, well, we're supposed to be that. I want that. And we actually then lose sight of the gifts of the current relationship that we actually have. And it's not just about iPhones and material things. It can be about relationships as well. Second is we take things for granted, right? We fail to recognize the bounty of everyday blessings, like a comfortable bed, a safe neighborhood, and being alive. That's something that having this ritual that Diana was saying earlier of waking up in the morning and saying these blessings that literally say, thank you, God, for allowing me to open my eyes. Thank you, God, for allowing me to stand up straight, right? All the things that we do. And now that I'm over 50, I get it. Like at 20, I'm like, what do you mean stand up straight? What's the big deal? I wake up, you hop out of bed. Yeah, not so easy anymore. I get it now. And then finally, we focus on the negative, right? We tend to focus on the mistakes people make, on the small hurts that we receive from loved ones. And we don't notice the positives that they do for us. We get stuck on those negatives. And if we're able to capture and have gratitude for some of the positives, what we find is usually those positives far outweigh the negatives. And if they don't, then we know it's time to make a change in terms of the people that we're associating with. Okay. Savlanut, right? Patience. Patience. By the way, I had fun finding the little illustrations for this. I really like that one. The Savlanut. Brooks, did you have a question or?
Oh, sorry. I just like the picture.
Oh, okay. No worries. Patience, right? It's interesting. A lot of the Musar origins, or going back to the biblical text in Musar, goes to this section in Bereshit. Once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the open famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stuff to gulp down. I'm famished." That is why he is named Edom. This lack of patience of, I want it now. That's sort of typified by Esau in this moment. And a lot of our rabbis pick up on that as sort of the paradigmatic moment where it's where we see that lack of patience. Avot Rabbi Natan is a later rabbinic work that talks about a lot of the rabbis and how they came into being. And so, what were the origins of Rabbi Akiva, one of our greatest rabbis? They say that he was 40 years old and had still not learned anything, right? Once he was standing at the mouth of the well and said, "Who carved a hole in this stone?" They said to him, "It's from the water, which constantly falls on it day after day." They said, "Akiva, don't you know this from the verse, water erodes stones," from Job? Rabbi Akiva immediately applied this, all the more so to himself. He said, if something soft can carve something hard, then all the more so words of Torah, which are like steel, can engrave themselves upon my heart, which is but flesh and blood. He immediately went and started studying Torah. This idea of a little bit at a time, And I first learned this from one of my teachers, Alava Shalom, who has passed away, Dov Zlotnick. He was my Mishnah teacher when I got to the Jewish Theological Seminary. And he encouraged us to learn and memorize the Mishnah, something that I actually have never truly done. I moved into Talmud and did other things. And he said that, how do you do that? You do that by learning a Mishnah every day or a Mishnah every single week. You don't try to sit down and learn everything. But if you learn one every day or one every week even, then by the end, you're going to know it. It's the same mindset as the Daf Yomi program, right? Of learning Talmud. How do you, this 3 shelves behind me is Talmud, right? It's a lot of material. How do you do that? Well, you take one daf every single day. And in 7.5 years, you will have gone through the entire Talmud. And in your lifetime, you can do that multiple times and get something new out of it each and every time. So patience, right? This idea of I don't have to learn everything all at once. And I love, as Rabbi Akiva, as I said, is one of the greatest, he was a late bloomer. He started late. It's never too late to start and to learn. And I love that from him. Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, a Musar practitioner, one of the more famous in the modern period, says, what is patience? The patient person is exactly like someone who is carrying a heavy package. Even though it weighs upon him, he continues to go up his way and doesn't take a break from carrying it. The same is true in all the relationships that are between people. We see and hear many things that are not according to our will, and we still continue to be friends. And I like this because it acknowledges the fact that being patient it's a tircha, it's a hardship. right? It's not easy to be patient. It's easier to show gratitude. It's even sometimes easier to have some humility. But to be patient with others is actually a very difficult thing. And far, far too many of us really struggle in one way or another with losing our patience. Alan Marinis writes, the situation in which we can feel impatient, situations which we can feel impatience are numberless, but there is one common factor that unites them all. We only burn with that particular fire when the focus in the situation is on me. And I love this because he dispels the biggest incorrect notion about patience. If somebody isn't working fast enough for me, I assume it's a problem with them. But what he's saying here is actually, I'm only impatient because I've focused that situation on me, not on them. You're delaying me. You're misleading me. You're berating me. You're interfering with my plan or standing in the way of my needs, right? Sometimes that only inner voice I can hear is my ego, loudly promoting all its important needs and plans and drowning out any other voice that might whisper within. That's where patience becomes something that I can do. See, if Diana says sound like road rage to some degree, right? If it's a problem with the other person, then I'm going to try and fix them. But if I acknowledge that if I don't have patience, it's actually a problem with me, then it's something that I can do. I can fix. I don't know if I can fix that other person. I know I can fix me, or at least I can try. It's one of the things a long, long time ago. Now I would say 32, 33 years ago when we took this class, my wife and I took a class at the UJ, which is now the AJU, in Los Angeles, called Making Marriage Work. An incredible class. It was taught by a psychologist and a rabbi co-teaching it together about how to form a Jewish marriage. And we talked about all sorts of different, means of communication and all these different sorts of things. And one of the things I remember very, very vividly that they said is when you are in an argument with your spouse, one of the first things to do is to establish who has the problem, right? If I don't do the dishes and my wife is upset at me for not doing the dishes, the reality is it's her problem, not my problem. Now, she's very likely going to bring me into that problem, right? But I don't have a problem. It's actually her problem. And then I can choose, as her loving partner, am I going to help her engage with her problem? And we can talk about it and we can deal with that. And one of the things that we learned is that very rarely, there are occasions, but very rarely is it both of our problems at the same time. It's usually one person's problem or another person's problem. And when we recognize that, it actually helps you try to deal with it. Because first of all, if I say it's not my problem, then I'm in a very different mindset. I'm probably not going to be as defensive, right? Because I don't feel like it's not my problem. And I can then allow my love for my wife to say, okay, I understand this is a problem that you have. You don't like me you don't like it when I leave the dishes there. Okay, I love you. I don't want to see you upset. I'm going to try to do X, Y, and Z, right? As opposed to the way these arguments normally go, which is she would say to me, you have a problem, you leave the dishes. I don't have a problem. Right? And therefore the conversation doesn't go anywhere. So with patience, it's a recognition that it's actually a problem with me, not with the other person. I like what Layla says about Mark has done the dishes for 10 years. Yeah, so I'm not a dishes person, but I have no problem doing laundry. So I do the laundry and Debbie usually does the dishes. Okay. Yet another source from Alan Marinis. This is from a different book of his. Take, for example, patience. He's talking about it in a different context, which is a feature of the inner life we experience every day, though more often its absence as impatience. Do you have a clear understanding of what exactly constitutes patience? Some people would say that patience is an unflappable inner calm that permits a person to wait for or be diverted from his or her goals almost indefinitely without emotional turmoil. Others would say that patience is the ability to contain feelings and not act out when provoked and emotionally reactive. Which is it? Is patience a kind of equanimity, or is it forbearance under stress, or is it a little bit of both? Diana. So it's interesting you say that, Diana. I'm actually thinking of reinstituting, probably not until after the new year, of reinstituting the Shabbat learning on Saturday after services. And one of the things I'm thinking about doing is going through a different midah every Shabbat. And just kind of talking about it and doing some practice and stuff like that. So keep your eyes open for that in the future. Although it does mean you guys are gonna have to come to services and join us for Shabbat. I guess you can just come up and join us for that class also. But
That would be great.
I know, Cullies, you have been asking for me to bring that back. It was
Right.
gone since COVID, and I just haven't brought it back yet. Okay.
Yeah. Even if it's like two Shabbatot a month or something.
Yeah, that may be
Like-
just to be able to have it a little more special. It's a little harder to
Mhm.
do it every single week, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's not a
that's what
bad
I was
idea,
thinking.
Diana. Okay. I like this, and I wanted to end with this source on patient. Rabbi Chiel Yitzchak, should be Yitzchak Perer, teaches, you can train yourself to be patient. You can train yourself to open the space between the match and the fuse. And I thought it's such a great way of conceptualizing this, right? It's not that you don't have a fuse anymore. And it's not that there aren't matches with lit flames, but we've worked on creating a distance between them so that it doesn't go like that. And it's a powerful way of thinking about this Middot of patience. Okay. Questions, a reminder, it won't be next week. It'll be on May 7th because we have 3 weeks that we are skipping. Practical Middot will be our last of this class. And then hopefully next year we will have some Shabbat learning and be able, for those who want, to do some more. And what I'd like to do actually is not only do the intellectual work, but actually do some practical work. And talk about ways that we can truly incorporate these ideas into our lives. And I think it'll be a great way to think about Shabbat.
This was amazing. I think also it's good, like on something like this, to have, like, because it is a practice, like we talked about, to have like an accountability partner. So you say, like, I really want to work on patience. Is there anyone else who wants to work on patience? Like,
yeah,
and then you sort of talk about like what your wins and the things that you didn't when you didn't quite hit the mark. Because it's really nice to have feedback when you're dealing with these types of, I guess, midot or attributes.
Yeah, and it's hard. And you know, I don't necessarily want to completely conflate this with a 12-step program, but the reality is when you're trying to change your behavior, you're trying to change the way you see the world, and in essence, that's what a 12-step
Yeah.
program is doing. You need that partner. You need somebody to be able to do this with, so that it's not just all alone by yourself. It's not a bad idea.
Hard in a silo to work on some of these things.
Yeah, agreed. Excellent. So we will meet on May 7th. After the class is over, I will have Bonnie send out to everybody who's in this class the readings, all the different books that we've mentioned, and that I recommend for those who would like to continue their own personal study in Musar and in Middot. There are a number of different great books that are out there, and I'm happy to share that bibliography with all of you. All right. If I don't see you before Passover, have a wonderful, sweet, kosher, meaningful Passover. And I will, for those who I do see before Passover, I'll see you on Shabbos, or I'll see you at other classes, or and over Passover itself.
Did you fix the link for selling the chametz, by the way?
Oh, you know what? I completely
We still have
forgot.
time. It's okay if you didn't. Yeah.
Do me a favor, because I will forget again, and when I'm going to go home, send me an email and CC Susan at betham.com, and she's the one that'll fix the link.
It'll be done before you leave your office.
Thank you. Bye, Augie. Thanks for joining us. Bye, everyone.
Laila tov l'kulam.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Lila Tov.
Laila tov.